In the opening scene, in the middle of the Nevada desert, an MMA fighter named Roy is pursuing bandits who have stolen something valuable, but his car loses control and is thrown off the road. 2 days before, two brothers, Danny and Joe, were hunting a deer in the middle of the desert, and when Joe found the perfect target, he shot with breathtaking precision. After the hunt, Danny expresses his eagerness to take their brother Roy on a future hunt. However, Joe is immediately dissatisfied after recalling Roy's propensity of constantly getting in conflict with the law and not attending their family hobbies since entering the world of MMA. Danny reminds Joe that, no matter how convoluted Roy's background is, he is still their brother who requires attention and support. On the other hand, Roy has just arrived in front of one of the arenas where he will participate that night in the heart of the glittering city of Las Vegas. Jason welcomes him with a joke about his tendency to arrive late, but Roy assures him that he has worked hard and is well prepared to defeat his opponent tonight. Roy immediately knocks JD to the ground in the ensuing brawl, then enthusiastically approaches Lisa to celebrate their triumph. But JD maintains his fighting spirit and gets back up, taking advantage of the moment when Roy is caught off guard to execute a counter-strike that eventually puts Roy to the ground, defeating him. The defeat enrages their boss, Julian, who had just lost millions of dollars due to Roy's irresponsibility that night. Julian believes Roy is having too much fun with his girlfriend, which is preventing him from concentrating on the match, so Julian takes the awful step of capturing Lisa and murdering her in front of Roy's eyes. Roy is upset and enraged, but Julian soon reminds him of his power and fortune, presenting a menace that Roy is scared to confront. Julian then leads Roy to a warehouse filled with stacks of mined, pure diamonds. Julian states that the diamond is extremely uncommon and has a high resale value. He instructs Roy to transfer the diamonds from point A to point B using his truck, promising a large compensation after the work is completed. This proposition intrigues Roy, but he still wonders why Julian chose him for the task rather than his soldiers, who are fully armed. Julian provides Roy with 3 compelling reasons. First, he recognizes Roy's ability as a truck driver with an exceptional track record. Second, the presence of Roy's 2 brothers, both of whom served in the military, is regarded as a great asset during the journey. The third factor is Roy's massive debt to Julian. Julian also threatens to harm his family and his brother-in-law if Roy refuses this task. Roy, feeling imprisoned in this circumstance, has no alternative except to kill his ego and seek Joe for assistance, but his calls are unanswered. Meanwhile, James invites Danny to supper with his family, but Danny politely declines because he has an appointment with Joe to assist him on the ranch. Danny attempts to reach Roy but receives no response, so he rushes straight to the ranch to meet Joe and inquire about Roy's condition. Joe reveals that Roy contacted him last night, but he was sleeping and didn't pick up. Danny becomes concerned that Roy is in need of assistance, but Joe reassures him that the call was only made once and that Roy is most likely merely intoxicated. Danny enters the house and joins the women in the kitchen, who are baking cakes. Roy appears at that point and is greeted enthusiastically by his 2 nieces, Beth and Ashley, and their mother, Laura. Danny walks to the stables to alert Joe about Roy's arrival, but Joe is still upset with Roy for failing to show up on their hunting day. Joe continues to curse, referring to Roy as a scumbag who has simply come to borrow money. Roy comes and hears Joe's statements, but Joe makes his stance obvious before Roy's eyes, making Roy regret his presence. Danny attempts to persuade him, and Roy requests Danny to escort him on a job to deliver some items. Danny agrees after Roy explains that this will only last 3 to 4 days on the trip and that he may ask someone to replace him at the base. While on their journey, Roy brings Danny to an underground fighting arena run by a buddy, where they witness a thrilling fight between Barney Boy and Big Duke. Barney takes the lead with fantastic boxing techniques at first, but when Big Duke gets a chance, he grabs Barney by the neck and slams him to the floor, knocking him out on the spot. Roy is intrigued by the Big Duke's savagery and is instantly drawn to fighting him in a double bonus fight, in which the winner would collect all of the betting money and bonuses, and the knockout would have to happen in the first round. The 2 underground fighters struggle fiercely, but when Roy gets the chance, He employs his unique necklock technique to force Big Duke to surrender and hurl him into the pool, winning the fight. They continue their journey the next day and arrive at Point A to pick up the cargo, where they encounter Polly, Julian's confidant and family member. Polly invites Roy in to show him the cargo contained within the drinks. Polly opens the drink's contents to expose diamonds, while the drink just serves as a cover. Polly informs Roy of the dire penalties he will face from Julian if the diamonds do not arrive on time and hands him a piece of paper with the coordinates of the drop-off spot for their reference. Roy and Danny make a brief stop at a local grocery store to rest and purchase some canned drinks. While Danny uses the washrooms, a bunch of disguised and heavily armed individuals appear in front of the shop and damage Roy's truck in order to steal it, despite the fact that the shop attendant spots them. He moves out to engage them, but he is fatally shot. They then shower bullets on the shop, forcing Roy to take refuge behind a table. After a while, Roy hurries out of the shop only to discover that the robbers have stolen his truck, so they instantly use the shop owner's car to pursue the criminals. Roy takes a shortcut and finds his truck parked in the middle of the road, but all the diamonds have vanished. Danny is still perplexed and wonders why they were shot at, but receives no response. The belongings left in the truck are taken by Roy, and they return to the car to resume the chase. Roy hands Danny his gun and tells him to shoot when they reach the bandits in the middle of the desert. However, the robbers retaliate with more advanced guns, forcing their car to be thrown off the road. Danny becomes increasingly interested in what is going on, and when he presses Roy for an explanation, Roy admits that the cargo contains diamonds valued at millions of dollars. Later that evening, police arrive at the grocery store to begin their investigation into the business owner's death. Detective Johnson and Detective Garcia assume that the culprit is a professional truck driver based on the evidence they find at the scene. Detective Johnson chooses to travel to another place where the truck has been discovered. In the truck's glove compartment, he discovers a folded piece of paper containing a key clue to the inquiry. The criminals transport the stolen diamonds to a small warehouse the next day, where it is revealed that Polly is the mastermind behind all of the robberies. Meanwhile, Roy and Danny continue their journey across the desert, growing increasingly sure that they will suffer terrible consequences as a result of Julian's actions. Joe, on the other hand, has just come home, but as he walks in, he is surprised to see that the house is in shambles and that his wife and 2 girls are nowhere to be seen. Joe quickly contacts Danny to inform him of the events at his home, and Roy joins in, assuring him that he knows who did it and promises to return his wife and daughter safely. Joe threatens to kill anyone who harms his family. When Roy receives a phone call from Julian inquiring about the diamonds, he puts his phone on speaker so Joe may hear the chat. Roy tries to explain what happened on the day of the robbery to Julian, but Julian insists on just getting the diamonds back and threatens to harm his family if they are not returned within 48 hours. Following the conversation with Julian, Joe requests that Danny provide him with his GPS coordinates. Then he goes to the basement, where he keeps a vast stockpile of weaponry, grabs a few rifles and ammo, and prepares for vengeance. Danny is initially furious at Roy for involving his family in this, and he abandons Roy. However, he returns moments later, understanding that they must band together to confront the perpetrators. When Joe arrives at the designated spot, he hits Roy angrily, teaching him a lesson about the issues he puts his family into. Joe then asks Roy to attempt to recall something that could lead them to the crook's whereabouts. The 3 brothers arrive the next day at the Palazzo Mansion, a beachfront mansion. Joe enters the mansion right away and fights multiple guards on the outside. Then they split up. Joe and Roy move inside, while Danny acts as a sniper to guard them from afar. Roy attempts to ascend the roof but is nearly apprehended by one of the guards, but Danny fires a precise shot, knocking the guard to the ground and saving Roy. Polly arrives at the Palazzo Mansion at the same time, dancing around and rejoicing over his victory over the diamond he managed to control. He walks into a room where Julian is accompanied by 2 women, which irritates Julian and prompts him to demand an explanation for Polly's rudeness. Polly ignores him, and he coldly grabs his gun and murders Julian's 2 companions. Polly then declares that he will take over all family enterprises going forward and requests that Julian leave the Palazzo family estate, claiming that Julian is not a true member of the family. The noise outside, where Roy and the thugs are involved in a shootout, diverts Polly's attention, and Julian takes advantage of the chance to steal Polly's gun before knocking him to the ground with a few hits. After overcoming numerous goons, Joe enters and confronts Julian, daring him to a hand-to-hand battle. Julian swiftly outwits Joe, proclaiming himself arrogantly the King of Diamonds. But Polly snaps out of his trance and shoots Joe, then shoots Julian many times, knocking him into the water. Danny meets Joe inside, who turns out to be alive thanks to the bulletproof vest he was wearing, and learns where the crooks have taken Roy and his family, and Danny immediately phones James to beg him to join their operation, which James is eager to do. The three of them end up traveling to a neighboring mine where the family is being held captive, prepared to confront the crooks and put an end to it all. Meanwhile, the criminals took Roy to a place near the mine and force him to compete in hand-to-hand fighting with one of Polly's men, with the promise that if Roy wins, his family would be released. A heated fight develops between Roy and one of the crooks, and Roy tries hard against the criminals' fighting methods, tiring him out. But when the opportunity presents itself, he uses a neck lock to shatter the criminal's neck, ending his life. Meanwhile, James shoots the criminals one by one near Polly, and the helicopter's presence causes Polly to panic and flee, but he orders his men to capture the sniper. Danny requests that James protect him from behind while he charges forward, but one of the thugs approaches James, who has no cover, and kills him, infuriating Danny, who then retaliates for James' death. Polly attempts to flee with two of his men, but Joe discovers them and kills both of Polly's men, leaving Polly alone. Joe's gun runs out of ammunition just as he is about to kill Polly, so they fight in unarmed physical warfare. Joe manages to tie Polly up in hand-to-hand combat, and after nearly killing Polly, the police come and force Joe to turn Polly over to them. Later on, the family is happily reunited. The cops praise Roy, Danny, and Joe for assisting them in apprehending Polly and his gang, who had been on the run for years. Roy decides to return to the ranch and assist Joe for a time, re-establishing their familial ties. The film concludes with the three brothers riding horses to their boyhood places, bringing the movie to the end. Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.